The topic of today's presentation is landscape characterization for biodiversity conservation using satellite remote sensing and geographic information system. We will try to understand what are these terms before we go into the detail. So let us start with the biodiversity, that is the first term. Biodiversity basically is composed of two terms, bio, which means biological, and diversity means variability. So in very simple way, we can define biodiversity as variability of the living organisms. So that includes all the plants, all the animals. When we talk about plants, it can be algae, it can be fungi, it can be anything which is living. It can be angiosperms, higher plants, all the ferns, pteridophytes, bryophytes, angiosperms, gymnosperms, they all are part of the plant kingdom. Similarly, in animals, all animals from starting from where bacteria or virus or to largest animal, let us say elephant or rhinoceros, even including human being, we are all part of the biodiversity. The second term is the characterization. Let us try to understand why we want to characterize. See, India has around 22.5% of the forest at present, but all that forest cannot be conserved for biodiversity or for that matter any other conservation effort. And currently around 5.8% of the total forest area is already under protection, under different like you must have heard about the names of national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, conservation reserves, community reserves. So are the different kinds of, so the question is how much of the forest we can protect or conserve for biodiversity, and that's why we need to categorize. That means we need to classify the forest, the good forest and the bad forest, let us say degraded forest, and then we can say, okay, these good forests, whatever may be 10% or 11% or 12%, we need to protect them. Therefore, the characterization means the classification of these forests based on the value in terms of the density, value in terms of the forest types, value in terms of the economic importance, value in terms of the endemic species, value in terms of the variability which is found in that forest type. So there are various aspects, we will be covering that part also. Third term is the landscape. Landscape here means large area. Now, large area means what? How large? Let us say if you say a small campus, it's not a large. We need to cover an area which has different kinds of the ecosystem. That is one criteria. Second is all these ecosystems should be independently able to function. That means all the processes, let us say biological or phytogeochemical cycle or whatever the processes are happening, they should be independently functioning without the intervention of human beings. If you have that kind of a landscape where all the ecosystems are functioning properly, we want that type of forest or that type of area identified, and that is called the landscape. So you can say it is a large land area. And if you want to define it ecologically, it is basically an aggregation of landforms. In landforms, you will have several land uses and land type classes. Let us say you can have water body, you can have a settlement, you can have a let us say factory area, you can have a agriculture area, you name anything is part of the landform. So that means we are talking about that area which has different kinds of aggregations, and then put together we call it as landscape. I hope by this time you now know what is the remote sensing. We are talking about the Earth observation systems. I will not go into detail because you had already had preliminary lessons on this thing. But yes, remote sensing provides a very synoptic coverage of forest areas or biodiversity areas where the biodiversity lives actually. So that is very important component. Now GIS, as mentioned here, is basically a tool for collecting, storing, organizing, retrieving, displaying, integrating, analyzing the data as per your requirement. That is a very important aspect. And then the second aspect is as and when I need it, I should be able to analyze. Third thing is the way I want to analyze. That means I may have some data, my requirement may be different. Somebody else want to analyze the same data, his requirement could be different. That means users should have freedom to analyze the data as per his requirement. And of course, this database is available in the computer domain so that it is in digital form, and anytime you can open the file and do the action. Now the question comes, why we should try to conserve biodiversity. Please look at these two diagrams. On the left side, it talks about the areas which are biologically rich areas. You can see I am the cursor point here. If you see all these yellow or orange, yellow lines here which are hash lines in different continents, you can see these are the countries where the biodiversity is very rich. That means as compared to the other countries, here the richness, that the number of plants and animals or endemic animals is very high. So that means India is one of those countries where you have very high biodiversity. On the right side, if you look at this diagram, it shows all these red countries, red regions in color. You can see these are the countries which have very high human population as well as very high animal population. I'm talking about the cattle, not the wildlife, of course. That means if you think about the India and China and neighboring countries, you see our problem is manifold. In the sense, we have very high biodiversity as well as very high population. There are some countries where population is less and their biodiversity is very high, so you don't have problem. Some countries there is no biodiversity and very high population, so they are least concerned. But in our country, we are blessed that we have all kinds of representation in terms of the forest types, in terms of the biodiversity. Therefore, it's our duty to protect it. And that's why this discussion today is related to that only. The whole area of India can be divided into three broad or big regions and one small region. This is a Himalayan region. On the uppermost left, you can see here, this is a one biodiversity hotspot. Now let us say there's a new term coming up, hotspot. Hotspot basically means here where you have very high number of biodiversity. That means the concentration of the species, whether it is plant or animal, is very high and very unique in that area. So that we can call it as a hotspot areas. So Himalayas are one of those. And if you look at this down here, you can see here this is in Northeast India. This is a part of the Meghalaya, you can see here, and then part of the Manipur and Nagaland and down Tripura and Mizoram. These are part of the Indo-Burmese region, which is also very rich in biodiversity. Third region is the Western Ghats, which has resemblance with the Sri Lankan plants and animals. So this is one region which is a biodiversity very high is there, and that's why it is also known as one of the hotspot regions. There is one small one is also there for Andaman and Nicobar Islands, but I'm ignoring at this moment. But these are the most important ones which we need to conserve. Let us look at a summary of what we have in our country. We have nearly 220 types of vegetation, which you will not find in the world anywhere. So this is a, you can say, blessing or boon to us that we have so many types. That means we start from the very evergreen forest which are available in the coastal region to very dry forest in the Rajasthan, and to the again dry, wet dry in the Jammu Kashmir region, wet, very wet to let us say moist region in the northeastern region and the other parts of the Himalayas. And this is also very important because human beings have been living everywhere, so they have been influencing the distribution and the type of vegetation in our country, and a lot of area is already under the influence of the fire. So present systems or present forest types which you see, they are basically influenced by the fires and influenced by the anthropogenic pressures which have been exerted by the human society. Whatever you see today, they are basically action and interaction of for many thousands and thousands of years, and that's why whatever you see is a very rare thing which we need to conserve it. With this 220 types forest ecosystem found in India, we have very high ecosystem diversity, which doesn't occur many places, and that's why it's very important that we try to protect it. So this is, you can say, it's one of the 17 mega biodiversity centers of the world. It has, as I said earlier, 3 biodiversity hotspots, and there are several warm spots it has 10 biogeographical zones. That our country is divided into several biogeographical zones. That means the biodiversity of each zone is different. So we have 10 zones. There are 4 endemic centers. That means, let's say, Eastern India, Western Himalayas, and the Eastern and Western Ghats. So even Andaman Nicobar Islands. And then we have 26 micro-endemic centers. That means the biodiversity present in those areas is extremely unique. That means you have micro niches where you have the biodiversity which is not found elsewhere. So this is what we have here in our country. So if you look at the number of species, you can say the area is only 2.5%, but the share of biodiversity which India represents is very high. You can say here around 45,000 plant species. Out of that, around 70,000 angiosperms. Angiosperms are those plants which bear the flowers. And then there are pteridophytes which are old. They are, little primitive in the cycle of when you talk about phenology and relationships. Out of that total number, around 33% are endemic. That means they are only found in India and surrounding regions, not elsewhere. And you have very varied topographical variations. You have very plain areas, you have very high hills, you have Western Ghats, where hills are, Eastern Ghats hills are there, Eastern Himalayas hills are there, and you have flat areas also. So it's very varied. Climatically also, our country has a lot of variations. That means you have one of the highest rainfall in our country, that's in northeastern region or in some part of the Kerala, to very dry in the western and to cold deserts in the northwestern Himalayas. And you can get sub-zero temperatures or let us say snow cloud mountains. So the temperature varies, the humidity varies, the altitude varies. This leads to very we can say congenial environment for biodiversity to thrive and biodiversity to evolve. That is why India is one of those countries. As I said earlier, so we have so much of area, let us say around 320 million hectares of area. That's around 2%, 2.4% of the total area which is there. Okay, I'll skip this. We discussed about this. We can also look at the quantitative and qualitative assessments because when you try to identify the biodiversity, we need to have different kind of approaches. One can be qualitative approach, we can say good, better and best, and the quantitative approach I can say, okay, this area out of 10 or out of 100, you can have a range, you can say 0.10 or 0.1 or 0.2 or maybe 1. So that kind of, there are many processes to do that. And therefore we need to identify the biodiversity hotspots. We know the biodiversity hotspot, but within that also you will have a high concentration of these species. Just like some examples I have given here, like there are some species like tiger, elephant, and there are some species, like particularly in the plants, which are very important. We call them as keystone species. These are the species which are very important for that ecosystem, and if that species is lost, then many other plants and animals of that ecosystem will be affected. That means that is the most important species. And similarly, there are some other name like umbrella species. That means if you try to protect one animal, the rest of the animals or rest of the forest or the rest of the plants are protected. So there are different names which are available in the literature, which are very important again, of course. We all know there are traditional way of biodiversity conservation in our area that people have been doing it. So you can prioritize it. You can do the rapid surveys because you have the remote sensing. And you can also carry out species specific. Say for example, you would like to conserve only rhinoceros, or you want to conserve only, let us say, one tiger alone, or you want to conserve, let us say, only a particular species. Let us say in northeast we have Nepenthes khasiana, which is a plant which is endemic to that region, and it's a insectivorous plant. So if I want to conserve that one, or let us say any medicinal plant, let us say Taxus wallichiana for that matter, so we can also have a conservation strategy only for that species. But let me also tell you here, species level conservation is not good. So that's why we are talking about the landscape, where you have different species interacting with each other, and that helps to species to evolve and the whole ecosystem to survive. And once we know this thing, then of course we can refine the approach and you can do better and better. But we can start with the remote sensing data and then focus on the conservation value and there are different methods to find out the value of the biodiversity, their vulnerability, and then you can also do the what will be the likelihood of this, but what will be the, suppose we lose it, then what will we be losing? That's a great question, of course, because it has taken millions and millions of years to evolve these species, and suppose we destroy over a period of time, probably we will not be able to recreate all that kind of biodiversity in near future. That's why it's very important for us. We have like the different organizations in the country who are doing the survey. They have very comprehensive knowledge of species, ecosystem diversity, and their distribution, that means a spatial extent, and then they also carry out periodic assessment and monitoring also very regularly. So that kind of arrangement is already there. I'll give some examples here, like Botanical Survey of India who does the plant survey, Zoological Survey of India does the animal survey. Similarly, Forest Research Institute carries out both sides of this thing. Forest Survey of India does the periodic assessment of the monitoring of the forest in our country. So information is available, but we need a technology where all this information can be put together, and then we can try to generate some database which will be more useful. And that's why GIS comes into picture, and that will help us also to quantify and to improve our decision making process. So data what we have may not be properly structured, it may be scattered, it may be incomplete, it may be inconsistent, and even if it's available, it may not be in the readily usable form. So these are some of the constraints which scientists or managers are facing in our country. And that's why it is important that we use technologies, modern tools like remote sensing, like geographic information system, and try to monitor this. It's not that we have done something and let us say 5 years or 10 years back, there is a need to revise it because the ecosystems are very dynamic. Anthropogenic pressures keep on happening, and therefore our strategy also should be refined and improved time to time. We can fix up time every 5 years is good enough for that. And of course then we have the geometrics which will help us to analyze the data. And when I have told all these things, that means we need to consider few parameters. One is the landscape dynamism. That means any forested landscape, maybe any part of our country, is very dynamic. That means it has dynamism in number of species. It has dynamics in terms of the phenology. It had dynamics in terms of the forest types. That means the landscapes which you find, they are very different. That's what I told you, there are 220 types of the forest, and each one can be a landscape. And then human impacts are very important. And there is a fear that climate is going to change in very near future, and therefore changing environmental setup is another important aspect which we need to consider very carefully. And therefore to handle all these things, the managers, basically it can be Ministry of Environment and Forest, or for that matter anybody, and with the support of the scientific community, we need to manage these in such a way that the dynamic information which is available to it does not become static. That means we keep on updating and keep on revising and improving it. Integrity and continuity of ecosystem processes at landscape level has to be ensured, because if you don't allow these processes to happen, then the biodiversity evolution, or we call speciation, the species evolution will not be happening, and that will lead to the disappearance of many species which are occurring in our country. And because of this only, it is called as electric science, which is a very dynamic, and a lot of work is being done. So let us look at how remote sensing can help us in identifying the species, or let us say communities or forest types. This example, if you can look, there are different tones and different textures, and each one is associated with different type of the forest. This is a campus which a lot of plantation is there, but you can see here there are different types. So if the cursor, if I am moving here, you can see this is a dark in color, this is a different forest type, bright red in color is a different forest type, then something here in between two, which is little dull in color, this is some different forest type, or let us say this is very smooth in color, this is different type of vegetation. And if you look at this, this is a campus of FRI building in Dehradun, but if you look at within this very small area, you have different types of the forest, different types of the plants. That basically what I am trying to say here, once you have this kind of data, it is possible for us to classify, and once we can classify, we can map them, we know the area, we know the species composition, we know the structure of these forest types, and then we can take an appropriate decision. So what are the issues in our country? First thing is that biodiversity which is being conserved, let us say we have around 100 plus national parks and around 500 plus wildlife sanctuaries at present in our country. But still there are a lot of areas where you will find some kind of representative ecosystems have not been conserved. I can give you a very simple example. Let us say in the Himalayas, we have a lot of national parks. Let us say in the bottom, in the Shivalik Himalayas, let us say you have Kaleswar, you have Rajaji, then you have a Corbett National Park, you have a Dudhwa National Park. And then you go little up in subtropical zones, you may not have any. In subtemperate zone, you may not have any, maybe one or two only. But again, if you go to very high altitude, you will have a Nanda Devi, you will have so many types of the national parks are there. So when I say the representative means that each ecosystem has to be conserved. And therefore we need to find out the gaps, and how do we find gaps? So we should have the protected area network map. We overlay that map on satellite data, and then we can find out, okay, these are the areas which have been left out. So we need to prioritize that. So what we have to do it, basically we have to identify the habitat diversity, that is the richness of the species and the different types of the habitats which are occurring. It can be evergreen forest, dry deciduous forest, or let's say moist deciduous forest, semi-open forest, or even salt dominated forest, or teak dominated forest, or red cedar forest, or mangrove forest for that matter. And that's how we try to conserve them. And if you look at the distribution of the forest in our country, you will find they are not continuously. You will find one good patch in the central India, you will find good connectivity in the western Himalayas, but if you look at the eastern Ghats, you will have a lot of discontinuity. That means these biologically rich areas are fragmented. That means they are not connected. The corridor is not there. So these fragmented areas are our concern, and if not protected, in long run, we might lose the biodiversity which is existing there. And therefore, to do all that, we need to do the evolution of some system where we can have the biodiversity information, and that's where we have developed a system called Biodiversity Information System at the Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, which is for ISRO, and you can go to the website and you can find out what data is available, and this can be used for any kind of local decision making process. Let us say here, to start with, I mentioned about one of the causes of biodiversity loss as the fragmentation. Fragmentation is the forest which is continuous, maybe 5,000 years or 10,000 years back. In any area, forests were continuous. Later on, human beings came. They started creating settlements here and there. They started building roads, and then they have started making agricultural fields. That's how they have cut the trees, cut the forest, and that's how now the forests are fragmented. And therefore, it is very important that connectivity is provided and fragmented forests are protected. This is just to give you what is happening to our forest. This is an example of Sonitpur district in the Assam. You look at here, you now understand what is red. Red is all very high quality vegetation. You can see its texture is very good, very smooth, which says that the dense forest in 1994. And you look at the middle slide figure here in 1999. You find here where cursor is there, just pay attention here, you will see that redness has gone from here, and you can see some cyan color and some whitish yellow color is coming in between. That means the tree cover has been removed from this area, and if you look at the 2000 image, the entire area is now in cyan color. That most of the forest which was found in this area has been removed in just 6 years. So that is a very alarming. That is not the only one aspect. The another aspect is, this is bordering Arunachal Pradesh, this example which I am showing, the connectivity of the forest which was on the western side here has been removed from the eastern side. So the migration of animals, let us say from eastern to western side, will not happen. Even if it happens, there are human beings in between, there will be conflict. So man-animal conflict will start. The biodiversity which was present here has been lost. So this is a major area of our concern. So what should we do? So we should have the biosphere reserves, we should have the sanctuaries, and we should stop the overexploitation of resources, and particularly we try to conserve the rare, endangered and threatened species, either in botanical gardens or maybe conserved in the forest area. So this is a priority area for us and we have been doing it. Another thing is that now we have modern technologies, so we can collect the germplasm from or seed or pollen or tissue and try to conserve it. Cryopreservation we can do it, and after a few years, maybe after a few decades, we can again grow it, and therefore you can take care of that particular plant or animal. We need to have a legislation. Of course, strong laws are required for the conservation because ours is a very densely populated country, and we need to. It's very difficult for forest department to go everywhere and do the policing. So very tough legislation is required. We do something, but still a lot of things can be done, and awareness at the local level is very important. So let me just tell you what type of biodiversity we are talking about. So first is called species diversity. That is the variety of species within a region. That means variability of species within a region. Genetic diversity, that means within a species you will have variability in the genes. We call it as genetic variability. And then ecosystem diversity, that means different ecosystems which are present in any landscape is called the landscape or ecosystem diversity. And then of course in ecology there are different terms like alpha diversity when you talk about a diversity within the community, beta diversity if you try to compare between A and B communities, and gamma diversity means when you try to habitat of whole region, that means you study entire Himalayas or let us say entire valley, then it's called the gamma diversity. Let me give you what remote sensing offers and what we are talking about. If you look at this triangle here, this is the hierarchy of the biological organization. So I can put in the bottom as the gene, but I have not put it here because from remote sensing you cannot talk about the gene or genetic level information. So let us start with the species, and the species converge into population, then into community, and then into ecosystem, and the landscapes, and then biomes and the biosphere. That's the global scale actually. So we are talking about the landscape level, that is the sub-regional scale where you have a large forest areas, and it is also amenable to the remote sensing. So you can say if you can look at parallel here, there are some satellite data like let us say Indian satellite data list 3, Landsat data TEM, or let us say ASTER data. All these can be very useful for this kind of activities. And if you go global, of course, then of course MODIS is there, NOVA is there. So data is not a problem. If you want to do the hyperspectral remote sensing data analysis, that yes, you can go up to some species level, some gregarious species. I mean, gregarious species can be mapped, but not the scattered trees. It is very difficult because then you need very high spatial resolution also and high spectral resolution also. So that's the area remote sensing is helping us. Let me give you the advantages and disadvantages of surveying. Conventional methods take a lot of time. If you use the remote sensing, that means you make a map at landscape level and you do the stratification. You know where to go, what kind of forest is there, and how to approach. All these information is readily available to you, and you have nowadays GPS, so you can easily go and find out that. So let us now come back to the landscape characterization. So as I said earlier, what is a landscape? It was basically an aggregation of landforms. So you can say it refers to the landforms of a region that are in the aggregation, and that can be a very simple definition. There are many, of course, you can do. So the question comes, what is the unit of a landscape? It is the patch. So patch is the unit. That means I basically, when I do landscape characterization, I am doing the patch characterization. In patch characterization, what I am doing? I am trying to identify different patch types. That means area of the patch and the shape of the patch. So there are two aspects. One is the area and another the shape. If area is large, it's good for biodiversity conservation. If area is small, it's not good for conservation. So we'll see, and remote sensing gives you me this information because I can draw a boundary. So I can define a patch as a non-linear, relatively homogeneous, contiguous area. So there are 2-3 terms. One is non-linear, another is it should be homogeneous, and third it has to be a contiguous area. If you talk about the patch along the roadside or along the railway line or along the canals, we cannot consider that as a patch because that is a linear feature. Here we are talking about the non-linear feature. Why we need to do, I'll just highlight few things because every species needs minimum area for evolution and survival and for adaptation, particularly changing climatic conditions. Therefore, to consider all these things, we need to have a large area for conservation. Otherwise, it is not possible. And that's why we say single species conservation is not possible. We would like to have many species conserved in a, and then they all will be interacting and evolving. So evolution is taken care. In situ conservation is essential for particular species to evolve. If you do the cryo preservation, then species cannot evolve because you have put in liquid nitrogen. That's not good way of. And adaptation is very much, which is possible only in the natural climatic conditions. And then of course all the goods and services which are required for human society or for any for that matter should function properly. Otherwise, if you don't protect it, there will be problem. Nutrient cycling is also very important aspect of it, which can be taken care in the. This is a diagram which I just wanted to show you here. If you look at this here, where cursor is there, small patches maybe of circular, square, rectangular, or triangular, or irregular. These patches are not considered good for conservation because you see I have shown the cross lines which indicates maybe 2-3 kilometers people will travel from this side to that side. That will affect the biodiversity. So size is important. If you look at this ideal I have written, or let us say good, these are the big forest areas where you have a lot of a core area and green area, and then you have a buffer area. So in buffer area there some kind of anthropogenic activities can be permitted, but in the green area, that is core area, we should not allow this. So we can identify these areas with the help of remote sensing. We know the area, we can find out what is the distance traveled by villagers to fetch the resources. So what we want to do, actually we wanted to do in this study, we wanted to identify the area which is in the center, red point you can see here, which area is basically has least disturbance. That means it is away from settlement or road. It has very high environmental complexity. That means the slope, the aspect, the altitude, all these are very variable in this area. I would like to identify because this variability leads to the creation of niches, microclimatic conditions. Microclimatic conditions help in development of very unique biodiversity. So we would like to identify that kind of area, and we would like to map unique habitats from the remote sensing. So that is the habitat ecosystems comes from the remote sensing data. So we can do that. This database can be used for different kind of this thing. You can use it for the biodiversity region identification, gradient analysis, finding the gaps in the conservation areas, try to find out biologically rich areas, and then you can also extension of PA network. Like you would like to increase the area under protection, but if you do not know which area to be included in that protection, if you know, then you can suggest to the government or the forest department, okay, this area is equally good, so we can do that. So this the study of this which has been carried out, the product is available as a biodiversity information system. You can always use it. And then of course it is also useful biodiversity surveys, where biodiversity is available, what should be my priority, forest management, and also for the location of the bioprospecting species. So for biotechnologies, they don't have to search here and there. The database which has been created in this study tells you where these medicinal plants or economically importance are occurring. And then if you want to study in throughout country, you want to know what is the variability of the chemicals, you can make samples and do the analysis. So this database is very useful. So first thing what we want to do is we wanted to know what is the disturbance of the forest. So this is the flow chart which says how to. So we have 5 parameters here. We want to know what is the fragmentation of the forest, what is the porosity, what is the interspersion, what is the biotic pressure because of the human existence, and what is the juxtaposition. So we start with the vegetation map which comes from remote sensing. We simplify this vegetation map into forest and non-forest and count the patches, number of patches of forest and non-forest in a particular area, unique area that I will tell you, maybe 500 meter by 500 or 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, we can decide. The whole map vegetation type, then I can take it here and I can find out what is the porosity of that, what is the patchiness of that, what is the juxtaposition of that. And then the source of disturbance is basically road and the settlement, and then I can create buffers. I can take this data from the topo sheets, or even nowadays a lot of information available. I can create buffer zones of half kilometer, 1 kilometer, 5 kilometer, depending upon the population which goes inside. These are the parameters. So let me define. Fragmentation is the number of patches of forest and non-forest in an area. Let us say some area 500 meter by 500 meter. Porosity is the number of holes, let us say, in per unit area in a particular type of a forest. let us say evergreen forest or dry deciduous forest. So these are the number of patches of different in unique ecosystems. Let us say the what we call the original ecosystems or original forest type. We can find out patchiness is in number of patches of all, irrespective of vegetation type. Interspersion is the mixing of the vegetation or mixing of the this mixing is very important because then migration of the species is possible if you can analyze this thing. Juxtaposition is again very important aspect because it tells you what are the neighboring ecosystems which are present, and the ecosystems are same, then that means that ecosystem is suitable for many species. Species migration will take place, gene exchange will take place. So juxtaposition is very important ecological parameter for analysis. This is just an example to show you how the landscape gets fragmented. This is, let us say here on the top, it is a unique intact forest, then slowly because roads and other things, and today it may look like this. Similarly, lower example, you can see here, this forest is very unique. The outer boundary is intact, no problem, but villagers go inside the forest and they do the cultivation. First year they cut few trees, then subsequently they keep on cutting, and then it gets a big area and deforested and becomes a this is a approach for vegetation and land cover type mapping. I will not go into detail of it. This is basically, there are different map. You can do visual interpretation, you can do digital interpretation, you can use the supervised, unsupervised classification, you can integrate indices. There are many possibilities to do the mapping. So this is, I will skip here. So let us see how can we do mapping. This is an area, a big landscape in Dehradun Valley. You can show this is I can show this cursor, you please follow. This is the red area is sal forest, which is on the northern aspect of the Doon Valley. You can see in middle there is a grayish color here, green color. This is a dry deciduous forest of basically grasses and exposed rocks, sandy areas here. And then below you can see here some patches of red and other colors. These are the moist mixed deciduous forest. So let us quickly, if I can map it. So let us say I could, I just, you can see here I have mapped here the sal forest. I can map the dry deciduous forest. I am just showing you, but you can do it nicely when you are working with this data. This is just an example. And then you can map mixed moist deciduous forest, and you can also have subtropical moist deciduous forest, like that. And then you can have agriculture. You can map the rivers, because rivers are also very important. You can map the settlements, because settlements are the source of disturbance. And then you can also decide the roads and put on, so all the linear features in red color, these are the roads. And that's how, let us say this, my map is ready. Now let's say this is the unique landscape. You can see dark green color is the all sal, then moist deciduous and dry deciduous and pine forest and temperate forests and settlements, all these things. So let us try to use the some method for analyzing this landscape. We will use some parameters, and to do that parameters, we will overlay grid. If you remember, I said we would like to, we would like to overlay the grid on this thing, and that one example is here. Just so these grids I can put here, and then I can count the intact grids and disturbed grids, so that I can find out how many grids have got deforested, that kind of analysis. That means I am basically doing the quantification. This is approach which I will tell you a little more in detail. Okay, and once we have done the mapping, we can go for sampling, and there are different approaches like random sampling. Sampling, basically, you see from remote sensing, you cannot identify a species. Therefore, we have to go to the field, we have to lay a sample plot. From sample plot, we have to find out whether what species of trees are there, what species of shrubs are there, what are the herbaceous plants growing in that area, what are the epiphytes growing there, what are the lithophytes growing there. All those things we have to quantify. And therefore, there are three approaches, like random sampling, stratified random sampling, and systematic sampling. When you use remote sensing, we always suggest that to use stratified random sampling, because it saves a lot of time. You don't have to search here and there. You can straight away go to the point and do the sampling. So these are the methods which normally are used. This is just to show you how we go to the field and lay sample plots. So the bigger square, if you see rectangle, square, you can see, sorry, not rectangle, square. This is basically to enumerate the tree species. The red, you can see this is a 5 meter by 5 meter plot for sampling or enumerating the shrub species. And you can see cyan color, or let us say light blue color. These are 1 meter by 1 meter sample plots for enumerating the herbaceous plants. So 31.63 meter or 20 meter, depending upon the energy, depending upon the money, depending upon your objective, what you want to do, you can try to have a plot. Basically, we do the species area curve to determine the plot size, but nevertheless, in India, we follow 0.1 hectare sample plot, which is uniformly acceptable. So you can start with this thing, and then you can, once you have the data, once you know the variance, covariance, species richness, you can decrease or increase the sampling size. So that's up to you actually. Let us say I had in the background, if you see, this is a vegetation cover type map. And on that I have put a grid, which you can do it in GIS, whether you use ArcGIS or any public, available internet available software, you can use it, and you can put grids here. That in this example, I am showing 250 meter by 250 meter grid, and let me explain you what I am trying to do here. So let us say in green areas here on the right side, you see there is a single patch in 250 meter by 250 meter. There is only one patch. You see all the most of the here. So if you just move towards Dehradun, let us say this side here, within 250 by 250 meter, you have a road, you have a agriculture, then you have a forest. That means three types of the land uses are here. If you go further, you will find more. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to find out the number of patches of forest within certain area. Here area is 250 meter by 250 meter. This has to be optimized because the criteria for it depends area to area. You are working in Northeast India, it could be different. You are working in Central India, it could be different. Working in Western Himalayas could be different. So normally we start 250 meter by 250, and we can keep on increasing the grid size. Let us say it can be 500, then 750, then 1000 meter by 1000 meter, and the count the number of patches which are found there. This is done in the computer, so you don't have to worry about it. You can write a software for this, or somebody can do it for you. And like this is the mark size of, let's say, 1.5 kilometer by 1.5 kilometer. But you have to optimize, because if you are a beginner, you will have to see which is the best scenario. Maybe 250 by 250 may give you the best scenario, represent your landscape, represent the disturbance, represent the biodiversity. This is an iterative process. This depends upon the experience when you are working with this kind of. Now I have told you about this process. Will I give you now a case study which we have done in the Pachmadi Biosphere Reserve, which is in the MP in Central India. This is a biosphere reserve, boundary outermost. Then it has Pachmari Sanctuary. It has Satpura National Park in the middle, which is the core of it, where you find all kinds of tigers and other animals. And also a lot of endemic species are found in this area. Particularly, you might have heard a called Psilotum nudum, which is a primitive plant which doesn't have a very well developed root structure, and all that is found here only in this area. And then you have a Bori Sanctuary. And then a lot of forest area, agriculture area, degraded area are in the periphery. So let us try to evolve. So I'm just trying to show you the example of same area. You can see some white spots in between. You have red or vegetation. Okay, bright red is all lantana camera, and then other dry deciduous forest. This is of course not dry season data, it's wet season data, so you will not be able to differentiate between many types. These are the locations when the settlement of the people came to India after some war with Bangladesh and other countries, so they were asked to settle here. When they came here, they were given this land. Their family was very small. So, but now today family has grown up. They have increased the area. So villages have come now in the core area of. So this is called porosity. Actually, this leads to the loss of biodiversity. And now, of course, I understand that the villagers have been asked to go out of this area, and rehabilitation program is going on for them. These are the green dots. You can see these are the areas we have done the sampling here. Let us say this is my vegetation type map here. Dark green is all forest. It's all forest. Then you have a teak forest here, different dry teak as well as the moist teak. A lot of lantana camera is there, a lot of dry deciduous is there, agriculture in between. And you can see, please concentrate here, you have a very dark green color, you have pink color which is settlement, then you have grasslands, then you have a lot of yellow. These yellow areas are basically small villages which are located in the forest, in the core area. I'm emphasizing two things. They are in the core area of the Pachmadi National Park, and in the forest which is dominated by very valuable plants which are occurring there. So if you look at this scenario, it looks you cannot conserve the biodiversity, because a lot of settlements, lot of agriculture is happening within a forest ecosystem, which is not supposed to be good. Let us try to have that thing in mind. If I have this kind of a scenario, what best I can do it. So then we did we have the settlements. Let us say here we have the road network, whether it is metal or non-metal road. We created a database in GIS. Then we created a buffer zone of half kilometer, 1 kilometer, and 1.5 kilometer for settlement as well as for the roads. So we know what is the zone of influence, so that we can overlay and do the analysis. We had a program at Ministry of Remote Sensing developed called SPLAN, and we can use that program to analyze different ecological parameters. Like this is one of the parameters result, fragmentation analysis. It just counted the number of patches of forest and non-forest within a given area, and you can see here the core area, that is the orange color. You can see here this is the core area, and core area is showing the high fragmentation. That is what I emphasized in the previous slide also, that core area is highly fragmented, and high fragmentation is not good for conservation. And if you look at dark green areas here in patches here and there, this is the least fragmented area and good for conservation. Please keep this thing in mind. We go to the next result. Now this is the, now we overlay on this the road network and the village network. You can see here how dense road network and the village network within a protected area, which is a very dangerous thing actually, because we want to identify areas which are least disturbed. And if you have very high density of ecosystem, road and the villages, then your ecosystems are not safe. Okay, so we tried to do the disturbance analysis. This is again, we have used 5-6 parameters. Like one of the parameters is fragmentation, porosity, interspersion, proximity from disturbance, that the road and settlement, and the juxtaposition. I'm not showing the results for all these parameters which have been analyzed. I have shown you the fragmentation result. Similarly, we have carried out the for porosity, for interspersion, for proximity. I have shown you similarly for juxtaposition, and we have used simple linear equation. You can see a disturbance index is a function of fragmentation, and we have given weights depending upon the area to area. We have to give weights: porosity, interspersion, biotic disturbance, and juxtaposition, which is simple linear equation we use, and certain knowledge based weights are assigned. So you can see here weights are given at two levels. One is the map level, that means porosity, what is the weight, let us say patchiness, and within patchiness or porosity or interspersion you have a different kinds of, like highly fragmented, least fragmented, let us say moderately fragmented, and for that also we have a second level of weight assignment. So first level weight assignment is the map, second level weight assignment is the within the map what are different categories, so that we can now this churn out in the GIS and get a map. You can see this kind of map comes out, which is, you can see it is all red in color mostly, which indicates that most of the area of this biosphere reserve is highly disturbed. And that is what I showed you in the first vegetation type map. The core area is interspersed by the so many roads, so many villages, and fragmented forest. And if you do this kind of analysis, you find most of area is unsuitable for conservation, because all that red area is highly disturbed, and green areas which are patches. If you see in the previous fragmentation map, also you had these green patches here and there which were intact. That means not disturbed, not fragmented. So those areas are good for conservation. So let us go next step, what we will be doing actually. So now I have two maps I have shown you. One is the fragmentation map, which shows a lot of areas under fragmentation. I am showing this map which shows a lot of areas under highly disturbed conditions. That means if I look from biodiversity conservation point of view, this landscape doesn't suit to my requirement. But let us see what we can do further. So then we can go to the field and do the sampling and try to find out what is the biological richness of that area. That is important. So what we have done, we have gone to the field, we have laid sample plots, and we have identified the species. For each species, we have searched the literature from the library, and we have found the known uses, because we do not know unknown use. Known use of each species, maybe for fiber, maybe for charcoal, maybe for maybe tannin or fodder, or for medicinal, or maybe for aesthetic. So different uses we have listed for all these. This is a big task actually. We have to consult most of the literature which is available with us. So this gives you the an idea what is the species richness, what is the value of the biodiversity, and what is the ecosystem uniqueness, and then try to combine with the terrain complexity, which comes from the digital elevation model, and then human role, that is the biotic disturbance. I have already shown you the biotic disturbance map to you. Now you look at this flow chart here. So we have done some database from Botanical Survey of India on rare, endangered and threatened plants. We have knowledge base about the ecosystem uniqueness, representativeness and the endemism from the field work again. And we have done the ground sampling to get the species richness and also to get the total importance value index. This is a procedure for that. We know the use and then we can find out what is the usefulness of that. And then we have disturbance map. I have already shown you. We have a digital elevation model. You can use any digital elevation model nowadays available, 30 meter or 10 meter. Then you can put all this in equation. Again, this is a linear equation which says biological richness is a function of ecosystem uniqueness, species richness, biodiversity value, terrain complexity, and disturbance. Normally, when we talk about biological richness, people think the number of species. Number of species alone cannot indicate the richness of that area, because it is very important to know what are other ecosystems or unique things are found in that area. That's why we have considered more parameters, and that is the beauty of this approach, that you can consider most of the parameters so that you can define the richness in most appropriate way. This is again, I said earlier, this is again linear equation. So you have the sum of basically the ecosystem unique with certain weight. Then similarly for species richness certain weight and biodiversity value, then terrain complexity and the disturbance index. So certain weights have to be assigned. This you need a little bit of knowledge. These are the field data collection procedure to find out the height and girth and many parameters and species name. Species richness, basically you must have heard about the Shannon and Viren index. We follow that formula and we can find out the species richness in different areas. But more importantly, you can also do the phytosociological analysis to know what is the species importance. That means you call it importance value index. So different kind of analysis are possible, and then you can range into 1 to 10 weights, so that you can say, okay, this species is less important, that species is more. It's all relative. It depends person to person, and subject experts will tell you the exact way. So normally what we do, we try to have the opinion of 5-6% and then take a average of it. Similarly, ecosystem uniqueness, that means that plant, number of plants which are growing there, are they endemic or are they pantropical, or they are cosmopolitan, or they are local or regional, and how many of them are endemic species, how many are medicinally important, how many are keystone species. That means this uniqueness comes from, or maybe tiger is present, elephant is present, any unique animal is present. So the ecosystems becomes very unique, and then we assign a weight according to the surveys we have done in the field, which species is more important, and based on that we can assign a weight, and that's how this process is carried out. And then, as I said, a biodiversity value, we want to know the importance of that. So there is a procedure to do that. Let us say I have a list of the species on the here, and then what is the fodder value, medicine value, edible, timber, charcoal, others, and total it up. So these experts have to help us to do this kind of analysis, and we range it from 0. 0 means no use, 10 means maximum use. So that kind of awareness comes when you work with this kind of data and take the help of the experts. So this table also goes into the analysis. Terrain complexity basically comes from the digital elevation model, which you can get or you can develop yourself from for any area. Disturbance index, I have already showed you the map, that red color which was showing, that shows different levels of the disturbance levels. Now if I run that model which says that biological richness is a function of ecosystem uniqueness, species richness, terrain complexity, disturbance index, or let's say representativeness, all these things now I can run, I get this kind of a map. Now if you look at the central part again here, it is a fragmented, but it is showing is a very high biologically rich areas, because the number of endemic species found there, number of medicinal plants, number of economically important plants is very high, and that means the area is very rich. At the same time is very disturbed also. Therefore it is important for us to remove these villages from that core area, and they should be settled out. So this is one way of characterizing. Now this is one result, this is the final result of this study, which says that these are the areas which are biodiversity is very rich, high rich, medium rich, and let us say least rich, or you can say also not much. Of course biodiversity will be always there, but it is our relative term, but you can quantify we have this kind of a database with you. So this we have done it for the Pachmadi biosphere reserve, but this whole exercise has been carried out under this project with the Department of Biotechnology and Department of Space. So you can see this is a biological richness map of the entire country. We have developed this database which is available on the net, our information system which is available bis.india.org. You can always look at this database and you can just download and work on it. You have to register yourself to get this database. So this is the final project, and let me also acknowledge the help of there many institutes, many universities have contributed in this study, which was coordinated by Indian Institute of Remote Sensing and then later part in NRSC, Hyderabad. But it's a unique study in the country which talks about the areas which have been prioritized for biodiversity conservation. Consider the ecological parameters, consider the knowledge which we have as on today. This is, let us say, these results. We started this study sometimes in 1998 and we completed by 2010. But this database is unique. No other country may have this kind of database. I would urge all the youngsters who are in the biology, studying biology, they should take interest and do this kind of repetitive studies, go to the same areas, what we have done, let us say 1998, 2000 or something, and what is now today after 15 years or 10 years. So that kind of monitoring of the biodiversity is also important. So to summarize, you can use remote sensing data to characterize the large landscape, like just like I give example of Pachmadi. You can do it for the entire country, or maybe for a state, or maybe a part of it. But it is possible to use the remote sensing data, the ground data, your knowledge, and GIS. All the database is created in GIS, and then you can churn out and you can develop beautiful outputs which are useful to the forest department. They are useful to anybody who's interested in biodiversity conservation, anybody who's interested, or let us say, to look at monitoring or do some science part of it. That's how the database has been created. With this, I would like to end my presentation here. Thank you very much.